Welcome back to Trust the Profits. My name is Colin Sheehan. This is one of your favorite shows here, a staple on the channel. That is right. This is Doubling Down. And when we go to New York, we go to Matt DeSantis. When we went to Tampa Bay, we checked in with our friend Barry Sniper. And normally when I go out to Golden Gate, I'll call in my friend Matt Dinnerman, but he's now the voice of Oaklawn. So for the big Rebel Stakes this week, we're going to go back to Matt Dinnerman, who's an old friend on the show here, and see if we could put together a daily double for Oaklawn with the Rebel Stakes. And of course, we have the return of Timberlake. We saw how Fierceness's return went. You're awaiting Timberlake, and then we're also awaiting Locked. Those are kind of the two other big horses on the Kentucky Derby trail who we're waiting to see their 3-year-old debut. So we're going to get that in this week's Rebel Stakes. And then, of course, me, being a part owner of Locked in the game of Silks, have my eye looking towards the Sunshine State for that big, huge race, which will probably be the Fountain of Youth the week following. So without further ado, let's get to this week's Doubling Down.
Trust the Profits is proud to be sponsored by Game of Silks. Go to silks.io to get in the game. Real ownership, real races, real rewards.
That's right. Always a pleasure to see my friend Matt Dinnerman at 3 Colts Handicap on your Twitter, but more importantly, the voice of Oaklawn. Matt, welcome back to Doubling Down. How are we doing? How's the move going?
I'm doing well, Colin. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a great move here to Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's a town that loves their racing. I think we had 31,000 people last Saturday. So, I mean, we're popping here on the weekends. And Rebel Day this Saturday, we're expecting somewhere in the 40 to 45,000 people range. We got a lot more dollars to give out than $45,000, which I was going to say. About 45,000 people. And the infield's opening up. We've got all sorts of cool stuff in the infield for the folks that are here in the state of Arkansas and even around it. So it's just a great town, a lot of good food places, really nice folks. And it's been a pleasure to be the announcer here. I feel very lucky.
Yeah, it's always exciting when you have these big race days to see those big crowds. I remember when I used to go to Suffolk Downs, we had the Mascap Day, and that was like the one day that you definitely wanted to be there. Because even though it was a smaller crowd, you still felt that excitement that you would get from what the buzz was about in the town, right? And of course, I've looked at the weather because as I'm going through the past performances, I feel like we've been a little soggy down there at Oaklawn. So it looks like you're going to have a nice week of weather as well.
It couldn't be a nicer weekend for weather, which is great to see, as we have had a pretty wet winter here, but 72 degrees and sunny skies. It's going to feel like California. So I sort of begged Mother Nature, hey, can you help us out a little bit here? And she brought the California sunshine over to us. So it'll be like that all week and next week too as well. So far, the weather calls for very, very sunny skies. So we're getting into the peak season here of racing. And on top of that, we're also getting into the start of really good weather coming up in the spring moving forward.
Yeah, that's for sure. So let's dive into this week. We're going to go with the Razorback and obviously the Rebel for our Doubling Down. This show, we put together a daily double. I always say you can't hit pick fours or pick fives without at least putting two together. And Matt, man, I had a tricky time going through these two races. Obviously, Timberlake's one we'll talk about in the next race. And I had that in the back of my mind as I was going through this race of how would I spread my cash and where am I going to play? Am I going to go against Timberlake in the next leg? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. But Matt, where did you go here in the Razorback, which is race 10, going a mile and a 16th for Saturday, February 24th?
Well, I spread a little bit here. Good race. We're going to see a scratch of number 4, Ain't Life Grand, 7-2 on the morning line. Was the morning line favorite, actually, and he's coming out. He's going to run an allowance race. It's in a way for a better. It's a shame because I would have never used him on tickets. I would have tried to beat him all day off the layoff, but he's coming out. So we're down to a field of 12, still a good field size there. My top pick is Notary, number 11. I think this horse is doing really well. There's a good chunk of pace in this race. Frosted Departure, Speed Bias is going to be close to the pace. A Promise Keeper figures to be up there. So you're going to get some pace in here for this horse to sit just off of. He's won 2 of his last 3 races, and the only race he lost out of that 3-pack of races, He ran second to Money Supply, who we saw come back to win. I believe it's called the New Orleans Handicap, I think is what it was. It was a grade 3 at the fairgrounds last week on Risen Star Week. So Notary has very, very good form for the high percentage trainer. And I'm thinking that he is going to run a very good race here. Should get a good trip. We've seen stronger fields in terms of quality in this race in the past years, but this is a very, very competitive, good betting race. And you've got a few horses in here, like a Magic Tap, who's also on my ticket, that seems to be improving. They've always thought he had quality. I mean, he ran 4th in the Pennsylvania Derby, but I think Notary's going better than ever. I think he's going to get the right trip. Last time he won by 5 over this track and could have won by more. So he's going really well right now. He's going to be the pick. And Magic Tap was my second pick coming off an allowance win. I think he ran very, very well, and I think that looking at that run, it sets him up well to run a good race against this tougher company.
Yeah, I felt the same way about 8 Life Grand the first time. When I went through these PPs for the first time, he wasn't scratched, and I heard the news that he was entered in that other race, so thanks for giving us that heads up, because I felt the same way as you did. I said, ooh, here's a horse I can beat off of a 7-month layoff, who did have a lot of works, but I felt like he's faltered in the same type of layoff a year ago. So he was one I was immediately starting to look to play against. I landed on Magic Tap as well, who started racing at 3. Look at his 2 losses there to Saudi Crown. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at there. I projected maybe getting, I go by Brisnet. If he could get even, he coupled a 93, so he's second off the layoff, even with like a 96 to 100 here, absolutely puts him right there. That's going to be a lower price, because I was thinking if 8 Life's Grand in there, he'll take some money and maybe I can get a better price on Magic Tap. I also considered a couple long shots here on my ticket. The 6 Midnight Rising, I think, is interesting. This horse had been running on synthetic and the turf, comes back and runs on a muddy track there at Oaklawn and puts up a Brisnet speed figure of a 95. Ended up passing that leader in an allowance, 140,000 non-winners of 2 lifetime. 30 to 1, I kind of just thought that this race was open enough that maybe this is a horse that can sit off. He's going to be on the forward part of that pace as well, but in the past on the turf has shown the ability to come from behind. So with all that speed, maybe he's one that can close. I also used the 7 U.S. Army. It always stands out to me when you see a horse that's 13 for 15 in the money. To me, he's going to compete regardless if that's Lone Star, Remington Park, or Oaklawn, which is what he did last time, again on a muddy track in that optional claimer 62.5. So I used the 6, 7, and 8. I used one more, but I believe you did as well.
I did. I used a couple others in here. I used Speed Bias, a horse that was heavily favored to beat Magic Tap. Last time he did not. He's a stakes-placed horse. He seems like a horse that runs to his company. Now, unfortunately, he ran very poorly last time out, and there were seemingly no excuses. So that was a concern. But if you look at his best races, he's one of the class horses in this race, and he's entered in this race for a reason. If he wasn't doing well after that poor effort, Ron Moquette wouldn't put him in. There's some pace he's going to have to deal with, but his best race makes him live, so I'm using him. And also Escapeologist, a horse that last time out ran on for second. We know how cagey Kenny McPeak is. This race has a lot of speed in it, as we mentioned. So maybe a horse like Escapeologist with a new jockey, Brian Hernandez Jr., 20 to 1, I'm willing to take my chances here. And I think that maybe if this horse can run into a pace that just totally collapses, he's worthy of sticking on the ticket here. So we're going to go 4 deep here in this first leg of our daily double with the Razorback and the Rebel.
Yeah, number 3, Speed Bias, I felt the same way as you. The only thing I couldn't get past was only having 2 wins. And that was a little bit of a deterrent for me, is like, 6 to 1's not bad, but I don't know if you're going to get 6 to 1. And then you have a horse that just doesn't always like to get there. And I start to tend to fade those horses when you start seeing 16 lifetime races in 6 seconds. It's kind of like, well, how much does he want to win? I went outside of you, one more horse. I went to the 13 Bolsey, I'm going to say. Is that how you pronounce it? I hope. Bolsey. And what I like here about Bolsey is just the fact that this horse, took some time to get on the track, started at 4. Kept him at the maiden special weight in order, to break the maiden. Actually broke it going longer at 1 1/8. Then they moved him into the allowance company, races 2 races in the allowance company. This is his 3rd off the layoff. And that last race at Oaklawn puts up a 97 Brisnet speed figure, sired by Gunrunner. To me, at 15 to 1, a horse on the outside that's going to be able to let that early speed go, maybe move in nice and tight behind that first flank, and then maybe make a late run. At 15 to 1, that was a price that I didn't want to necessarily leave off of my ticket. I don't know about others out there in the crowd, but I'd love to hear from you, because I started to take a look at Thoroughgraph and started to try to figure out how to read those charts. And, one thing I love about this sport, Matt, is there's just always something that's intriguing to look at. You can play a game like Stable Duel if you're interested. You can do something like betting parimutually. You can go do win play on horse tourneys. And then you can also use all of this different data, such as Equine Edge or Brisnet past performances or daily racing form. And I started to kind of delve into Thoroughgraph, who I heard on the Steve Bick show. And I'd love to hear from my viewers out there. Just comment in the comment section if you do use Thoroughgraph. I'd love to hear who you guys might have landed on, because going through those, and I'm early in learning my Thoroughgraph career, but the 1 and the 5 were the horses that I think stood out from a Thoroughgraph standpoint. Seize the Night and Octane, 2 horses that had put up some really good numbers on those papers prior. For me, the 5 victories came in restricted races on speed favoring tracks. Obviously at Gulfstream, he's going to be part of that early pace. So that was one that I was interested in, but ended up leaving off. And as you can see what we talked about, I always like to look at that prime power. It gives me a good sense of how competitive this race is. And you go 143 all the way down to 126. You've got a good group of horses here that's going to make this a very competitive race. So let's hear in the chat who you like. Do you use Thoroughgraph at all, Matt?
I don't use Thoroughgraph, but I know people that do who say it's very effective. So
yeah,
and that's the thing about this game, right? Is there are a lot of things we can improve in this game. We talk about it all the time, but one thing that this game is very good at, and that has no shortage of, is statistics. And we have plenty of past performance products that can tell you a lot. I know people that absolutely love Brisnet. They think it's great. I'm a DRF type of guy. I'm a replays type of guy. I'm a little more old school, probably because my dad's old schools, and that's how he was taught, and he's done well playing the ponies. And then you've got Thoroughgraphs and Time Form, and now you're seeing certain websites doing trip notes. So a lot of stats out there for not only the loyal customers, but also people that are new and want to learn more about racing and how do you analyze and how do you play these races. Well, there's a lot of stats and a lot of options for you to choose from to look at and see what fits best for you and what you have the most success with.
And that's what I love so much about it, is you could always take a month and say, hey, this month I'm going to focus on trying to learn this and do it this way. And you could come up with completely different answers to the question, as they say. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And how can I forget the Formulas Picks, who's right here on our own channel? So I got to give him a plug, because if I didn't throw that in, they'd be giving me a hard time. But with that, we move on to the second leg of our daily double. That is the Rebel Stakes, and the Silks purse, $11,875. That's real money going to the owners of these horses in Silks. This is the highest purse since Breeders' Cup, which is key to showing you that your 3-year-olds are now, we're inching closer and closer to the Kentucky Derby, obviously. And you have a couple of horses in there owned, but not Timberlake. Timberlake is not in the game. He was not picked. Matt, Rebel Stakes, do you like Timberlake?
I think he's the class of the race. I think he's the best horse in terms of raw talent. Do I think that he's a good bet? Probably not. Did I use him defensively? I did. I used him defensively. Some people would frown upon that. I think his class, he just seems a little classier than these, but he's not a great bet, and he's not a single for me either. I went with Northern Flame on top for Legacy Alpha Racing, whoever that is. Hopefully, we're both thinking the same, that this horse is decent here, because if he runs well, that's a good purse to win for real money. Yeah. I think this horse last time ran a very good race. He was in an allowance here at Oaklawn. He dueled in the lead, and he, to me, looked like he was waiting on horses a little bit, and a horse came up to him and he just never let him by. And I thought that was a good stamina building run for him. He had to work every step of the way, and he won. I like the fact that this horse ran 4th in the Breeders' Futurity as a 2-year-old to locked, and he ran okay at a big price, and he wasn't on the lead. So I don't think he needs the lead. That's a good thing. You've got Carbone inside and all the way to the outside. Time for Truce going to be showing speed. So I think the pace is going to be decent enough. And I'd like to see Northern Flame stock that, especially with Julian Leperoux riding, who's a pretty patient rider. I wouldn't imagine he's going to go with Carbone. So I'm hoping that Northern Flame can stock, and I think that last run again really sets up for his sort of stock and pounce running style. And I think that last race really in that first level condition really sets him up well here. I'm not being too creative. The only horse at a big number that I thought was interesting was Next Level. This horse had a horrendous trip last time out. He's a horse that probably wants more ground. He's getting a little bit more ground today. He's a bit of a plotter, which is a concern. But again, there's some pace for him to run into. We saw Keith DeSormo win with a bomb horse last year. So Next Level, he's the price horse for me in here. Again, one that should have been right there, even closer. Probably could have won last time with a better trip. He had a bad trip. And make sure to watch that race because Footprint, who was also in the race, or rather he's in the first race on Rebel Day, he is going to be one of the favorites in race one, but he had a bad trip. There were a lot of trips in that race you want to note. So I sort of keyed in on those three.
Yeah, and I think Northern Flame was one that he was like just off the end of my ticket. You're getting third off the layoff with him. You can draw a line, I think, through that race in October after the Breeders' Futurity. I think that might have been a little bit of a bounce back from that really good performance in the Breeders' Futurity. That was at 2. Now they're 3 years old. He's getting third off the layoff, so you can expect that at least expect some better from a speed figure standpoint. Another increase will certainly put the horse right in the company. I had a lot of interesting notes on a lot of these horses where I thought you could go a lot of ways. I think the 6 Dematic is very interesting. This horse, and I highlighted in purple all the times these horses ran in muddy or sloppy tracks because that was what part of my opening comment was these horses just kept catching the muck at either Belmont or Oaklawn or Fairgrounds. But Dematic's a horse that has shown improving and breaking the maiden in the slop, going a mile and a 16th on the same track is interesting to me. I'm actually not going to use Dematic. He's one that I'm worried about. I am going to use Timberlake, the exact same reasons you said. It's had some really solid works. When you see that on the paper, not only has he shown the performance from what he did last year, winning the Champagne, finishing 4th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, 2nd in the Hopeful. The work backs with under Brad Cox make it hard to leave this horse off. The price I'm going to go with is the number 9 Laganos. And I'm doing a little bit of listening to an interview that Steve Asmussen gave on the Steve Bick show not too long after that last race in the Smarty Jones when they asked him about this horse. And he said in that interview, I gave the jockey the wrong instructions, and that was my fault. So I think you can cross a line through that performance in the Smarty Jones where he told him to kind of go, and that's why you see him is the comment is legit pace. But that's not necessarily what I think Laganos wants to do. I think he wants to sit off of that pace like he did in his allowance breaker and like he did in his maiden special weight. By the way, that was at Kentucky Downs on the turf. So that's kind of intriguing to, that the horses that can actually win in that grueling turf at Kentucky Downs then come back and have a nice performance on the dirt. The first race on the dirt was actually against First World Ward and Parchment Party, who are 2 very legit dirt horses. We haven't seen a ton of them. And then Laganos actually beat Footprint in that allowance race, the same Footprint that you talked about who's running in race 1. So obviously you can maybe get a little hint of what Footprint does to give you a little sense of Laganos. I'm more interested in the 20-1 on a horse like Laganos, giving him another shot here. And I think Laganos is one for the Steve Asmussen barn with now, as I mentioned, he said that about Rosario. He puts his son aboard, which is interesting as well.
Yeah, and the thing about him, Keith, is he has gotten better, it seems, every racing week here. I mean, he's really done well. He's battling for second in the standings behind Christian Torres. And Keith is one that I've noticed he has really good hands. He's very quiet on a horse, and he doesn't get in their way. Horses don't get rank under him. So I think with Keith aboard, you're going to see a ride here that he's going to put him in the right spot, wherever they feel that is. He's a very smart, intelligent guy. One of the smartest riders in the room, in my opinion, just in terms of intelligence alone. Very, very sharp guy. So with a guy like Laganos in there, it's going to be interesting. Steve's got 3 in the race, and Carbone's going to be sending. We know that. Laganos is probably going to be sitting off, and then Dymatic's going to be coming from behind. So he's got 3 different horses, all with 3 different running styles, it appears.
And I've got highlighted there for you the Timberlake, 113 days off since the last race. Any concern there for you, like maybe what we saw? Do you think Fierceness's run will influence some bettors thinking about Timberlake here in this race?
I'm not so sure if Fierceness's run will change anything based on how he ran third, because I think a lot of people know he's an inconsistent horse. But I will note that what will sway bettors' minds, he's coming off a layoff. The only time he ran in a 2-turn race, yes, it was in the Breeders' Cup. Yes, it was a few months ago. But he didn't shine necessarily. He didn't show us, hey, I'm a legit 2-turn type of horse. I'm not saying he's a sprinter. I don't really know the answer to that. But I think we're going to get a gauge against a field like this, which is solid, but it's not necessarily full of what appears like grade 1 type of horses. We're going to get a sense of A, how Timberlake stacks up going 2 turns, and B, is he going to be ready to enter the Derby Trail next time out against what all likelihood will be tougher company. But I think for $1.25 million, this is a good start to the year for him to show us what he's made of and to see if he's taken a step forward from 2 to 3.
Absolutely. And you can pretty much guarantee you win this race, you're finding yourself in the Derby starting gate with the points. You'll get what you need by a win here, just as Sierra Leone. The gates are starting to fill up as you figure Sierra Leone, Track Phantom, Fierceness have the points, and then the winner of this race is certainly going to jump in there as well. Here is your ticket from Matt and myself, presented by Sherbet Coffee. Awesome coffee. I drink it personally myself. It's a great way to wake up in the morning after a long night of handicapping, and when you got to drag yourself to work, it's a good way to start. I'm going to go 6, 8, 13 with the 7 and the 9. That'll cost you $8 for a $1 bet. And Matt's going to go 3, 8, 11, 12 with the 2, 7, 8, which will cost you $12. Matt, always love having you visit. Always love having you stop by. Will we be having Twitter Spaces, Kentucky Derby as we get closer, my friend? I know you. I love when you host those and get some conversation going about the field.
Well, we're hoping so. That's the goal here, and we may even have an Arkansas Derby or even Rebel Space. I don't know yet, but keep an eye out for that on the Twitter. Or X or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we'll have some more in the future. When, I don't know, but they'll be around.
I'll moderate for you. I'll be your bouncer at the door. All right. So if
that's sort of my weakness, is I need to be a little more like, hey, you're in, you're out. Hey, stop, with all this, relax. I'm not great at that. So that would be a perfect job for you.
I'll bring the muscle. There you go. I'm pulling in muscle when it's behind the phone. All right. Just not.
Please do. Please do.
All right.
He's in lunch the next time we see each other.
I love it. I love it. Hopefully it'll be down. I got to come down your way. I got to start getting outside of just visiting Saratoga, as El Hombre tells me. He says I got to start going elsewhere. But this year, Belmont Stakes at Saratoga, I had to sign up for that one. So it's back to Saratoga for me. And then next year we'll start branching out across the country. He's Matt Dinnerman, voice of Oaklawn. This is Doubling Down. I'm Colin Sheehan. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, good luck to everybody.